The Book of Haggai is not just a prophetic book, but it's a book that carries a lot of psychological weight. So it's a book that shows that God is trauma informed and He's ready to walk with us into our healing journey. So when you open your Bible and you read the Book of Haggai, it's a story. It begins with a story, and you meet the people of Judah. These are the people who had come from the Babylonian exile. So they are people who had gone through a traumatic event because there was war, there was displacement, and there are also people who had undergone a lot of loss. They have undergone so many losses. So they had lost community, they had lost whatever was familiar, they had lost their way of worship, because they had to move from where they were when Babylon conquered Judah, and now they went and started being like even slaves, so they had even lost freedom. And now when you read the Book of Haggai, it's a time where now they had returned to Judah. And now the first few verses is where the Lord, through the prophet Haggai, is talking about how when they came back, these people really started off in dealing with the things that were very external, and they neglected the temple. So this is where you meet God asking them how can they continue ensuring in terms of their external things are working well, yet they have neglected the temple. And now this shows one of the ways, like it's a trauma response, whereby when we go through traumatic events, majority of the people, when they come out of the traumatic event, a traumatic event is something that happened. For example, there's war, or maybe in terms of the context of our country, there was riots and everything. That's a traumatic event. But trauma is the imprint that you carry with you. So maybe because something happened, now maybe there was abuse in the family, now move on with the life now in terms of people pleasing, in terms of always anxiety, because you want things to be in control. So the same case to these people. They had gone through a traumatic event, and now when they came out of the event and now they were back to what was familiar, they're back to home. But the truth is they went back to a place that was already like in demolished. So you can imagine where war had happened. So this is a place where it was no longer the same. So they really took so much effort in terms of focusing on rebuilding the outside world, but they neglected the inside. So this is a time where God is asking them a question and asking them, why would they now keep on? Actually, it says that the people say that the time has not come in verse 2, that the Lord's house should be built. But then the Lord is asking them, then is it time for them to dwell in their paneled houses? So God here was he was pointing out something that always happens to us whenever we go through traumatic events. Because now when we go through these events, majority of us rush back into building back other things. So we get busy in terms of our career. We tried our best in terms of solving every other thing, because now we are trying to regain time that we lost. But many of us neglect the temple. Now, in the old times, the temple was a building, it was a structure where God had to be in. But now, during this time, the Word of God says that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So that means when we relate to this book, when we relate to this book, like the Book of Haggai, it's a call for us, especially right now when the year is beginning, to realize that whatever, for us to start or for us to begin well, it doesn't start by us creating what is in the outside, but it starts by us really rebuilding the temple and really looking into our lives, into our internal structure. Which parts of us have we left in ruins? So when you continue reading, there's a verse 6 where it says that we should consider our ways. because it says that you have sown much but bring in little. When you look at that verse, it looks like over functioning, like you really keep on putting more into even other people's like you are trying to handle even more than you're supposed to. But by the end of the day, what does it bring? It brings you it gives you little. Why? Because you'll end up feeling drained, you'll end up feeling not satisfied, because by the end of the day, as you are putting more into the outside, you leave the inside empty. It continues to say you eat and drink, you eat, you don't get enough, you drink, but you don't get filled. So when you look at eating and drinking, it can be you can look at it from the physical perspective, but you can also look at it from a spiritual perspective, because we are told like Jesus is the water of life, and man shall not only live by bread alone, but by everything that comes from the Lord. So this looks like a distorted view of God, because sometimes we have so many Christians who know God, who believe in God, who attend church every day. That is a way of eating and drinking every day. But by the end of the day, they come out empty, they come out not filled, and they come out not drunk. Because the truth is, so long as your temple is in ruins, it doesn't matter what really is happening. So long as it is in ruins, it is in ruins, you will always end up unfulfilled. It continues to say you clothe yourself, but no one is warm. This looks like you building walls instead of boundaries, because you're coming from a traumatic event, maybe from that relationship that now your heart is broken. So because of your difficulty in trusting, so you feel like nobody else can be trusted, and you start building walls instead of creating boundaries. So it makes you isolate from other people, or it makes people know that when it comes to you, there is no room to be able to access you. Or it looks like you using like into ego defense mechanism. Ego defense mechanisms are psychological strategies that we use just to protect ourselves. So this looks like repressing, because now you feel like you can't be vulnerable to anyone, because at some point you are vulnerable and someone took it for granted. It looks like displacement, since now the temple, which is your body, is in ruins. The temple being in ruins, it looks like a dysregulated nervous system. It looks like not being able to be emotional intelligence, so you don't know how to do and you don't know how to manage and regulate your emotions. It looks like distorted negative thoughts that you have on your mind. All these point out to renewed temples. So sometimes we try to clothe ourselves, and clothing ourselves, it looks like the things, the blocks that you have made in terms of protection because of the experiences that you have gone through. But it doesn't matter how many blocks that we built, and when the temple is in ruins, or when the nervous system is dysregulated, or when you have not been able to feel and name the emotions that you have gone through, then by the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much or what you clothe yourself, you will still be remaining empty. And it also talks about how you earn wages, but you put them in walls. This looks like the efforts that you make. So you make a lot of effort, but by the end of the day, you either use it in terms of sickness, because of maybe the sickness of the body, or you use it in terms of drugs and substance abuse. Why? Because you're really trying to numb. The things that you are trying to solve really aren't the core problems, but the core problems, it's the ruining of the temple is in ruins. So when you look at that verse, this shows us, or God is inviting us to a way that He shows us, because verse 6, he's not like he's just pointing, he's not like he's just naming them, but he's pointing us to the issues that we face when the temple is in ruins. And these are signals. God is trying to tell us, when you see like your efforts are mismatched, then there's a problem. That means there's a temple issue. And when I talk about mental health, how I have, like in my experience, I've come to realize majority of the mental issues are temple issues. If your temple is in ruins, then there are going to be issues either in your perspective, in your how you feel, and in all, like it is about your mind, your heart, and also your body. Because some people are just stuck in their body. in terms of how God created us. He created us with an alarm system in the nervous system. So some of us, our alarm are still on because of the event that happened, because of the abuse that happened. Your alarm is just still on, just trying to tell you each and every time. That's why maybe you are stuck in anxiety, you're stuck in hypervigilance, you're stuck in numbness, and depression and all other things. So mental health issues are actually temple issues. And in the book of Haggai, we see how God presents it. God presents it like these are signals that you need to watch out for. And if these signals, you see them, that means in one or another, the temple is in ruins. So when you find yourself either putting yourself into trying to really manage the external and you still feel unfulfillment inside you, that means your internal, like the temple, has an issue and it needs to be rebuilt. And that's why in the book of Haggai, that is actually the message, that it's a call for us to rebuild the temple and for us to not neglect the temple, because many of us have neglected how we feel. Especially, for example, in the Christian community, emotions, especially the big emotions, we really don't know how to feel them. Many of us encountered emotions as sin first before we encountered them as information, or we encountered them as maybe more demonic than we encountered them as signals. And now when we have a disconnect with the heart, even the word of God says that guard your heart in all diligence, because that is where the issues of life flow. So whenever we are not able to manage our emotions, then it will really call a disconnect within the body. So when you look at the temple, it's a building, but when you look at us, it is our body. So it is very important to ask ourselves which part of our body needs rebuilt and which part of our body do we need to also access. The same way, the way you would want to renovate a house or something. Do I need a door? That looks like a boundary. Is my roof leaking? The same way that you look into the house and understand what needs rebuilt and what doesn't rebuild, the same way. But we also see that sometimes it can be difficult for us to start the rebuilding. And that's why I said the book of Haggai goes beyond being prophetic. And it is really has psychological depth, because it also shows us that when they were told about the reason as to why all these things are happening is because they have neglected the temple, it continues to say that God stirred them up to enable them to be able to start to rebuild the temple. And now as we are in the beginning, still the beginning of the year, it is a call that God is ready to stir us up so that he may be able to show us and also help us so that we may be able to start rebuilding the temple. Because there are some of us, depending with the level of the trauma that we have had to go through, we will need to be able to be stirred up so that the process of rebuilding can take place. And being stirred up, it looks in different ways. It looks like having guidance, like either mentorship, either therapy, in every different way. And it looks like also even getting revelation from God, because there are some things that have come to realize that they are very unconscious. The shadow part of us, we call them the shadow parts. The shadow parts of us that we really need for them to be revealed so that we'll be able to. So you can see the character of God here. God was not coming to shame them, but he was coming to remind them that I see these are the things that are happening. And then he also showcased their response by telling them, I can see how you're really rushing to build the external, and also returning them to the point of this is really the issue. The issue that why all these things you are facing, it is because the temple is in ruins. So the question I'd like you to ask yourself, which part of my temple is in ruins? Because that is where the solution is. Because the time we will start rebuilding our temple is when we are going to be at peace within ourselves. Then another thing you'll see in the book of Haggai is how I don't know actually who wrote this book. I didn't research, but when you read it, you realize when it was written in time periods. So when they were told about rebuilding the temple, and when God was questioning them why they have abandoned the temple, and he's also questioning us today because he's pointing us. When you see the rate at which mental health issues are really, it is really alarming, and it is showing that it's a a temple issue, that many of us have neglected the temple. And many of us have not neglected the temple because they wish to neglect the temple, but many of us have neglected the temple, but sometimes it's like in terms of protection purposes, because of the things that they had to go through. And they feel like the measures that they have made, it looks like it's like protecting the temple itself, but it's still ruining it. Because you see, when we don't speak up and maybe ask for help or sought for help, or really deal with the issues and repress them, then the temple continues to be ruined. But then you realize there was a time period when this message came. It was like on the 6th, what does it say? On the 6th month, on the first day. But then when the Lord stirred them up, it was on the 24th of the 6th month. And there are many other dates. What I picked is that God was showing us process. He doesn't reveal things to you to shame you. He reveals things for you to see, so that you can come in partnership with him, so that he helps you in the healing journey. Now, when you continue, after he started them up, they started rebuilding the temple. But when you continue, it continues to say how, when even the Lord asked them, because I know, because he's omnipresent, he would see through them. And because he would see through them. And then he asked them, because it talks about who among you saw the temple in its former glory. So I believe that those during the time of Solomon, when it was built, when it was huge, when it was big. So that can look like you feeling like, I may never return to the Yvonne I was before. I may never return to the happy girl I was before. You look backwards and you see that was a greater glory. But the Lord was telling them that in comparison with it, in their eyes, it was nothing. But when you continue to read, it talks about how the glory of this latter temple, the one that is being built now, will be greater than the former. What is the Lord trying to tell us? That the moment we start building, we might look back and look at it as it is nothing. But he's telling us that the more we continue to rebuild, we will see that whatever we are building now, from the ashes, from the messes that we had then, it's going to be more glorious than it is. However, there are some people who don't have anything to compare. Depending, especially maybe you had very adverse childhood experiences, you didn't have childhood experiences, all you remember since you are a kid, when you are growing up, it was all pain. So for some of us, we don't have anything to go back and look into. We don't have anything else to compare, but it's still the same, because when we start rebuilding the temple, we realize that whatever we are going to be building now, with the skills that we are going to have, with the tools that we are going to have, with the revelation that we are going to have, now we are able to connect better, now we are able to decide better, now we are able to manage our emotions better, now our body is safe within ourselves, our nervous system is regulated. Then that already showcases that whatever you are building right now, its glory is going to be better than from wherever you are coming from. And then it continues to say that in that time, when the latter temple is going to be built, it will be a place of peace. And that really showcases the healing journey. When you start, you might think that it's going to amount to nothing. But the more you continue, you realize it becomes a state and a place of peace. Now, as the book of Haggai comes to conclude, it says that the moment that they started rebuilding the temple, I think it's from verse 15, and God was telling them that from that day they will be blessed. Now hear me out. It doesn't mean that even in the chaos and the everything there is no blessing, but it means that we'll now be able to accommodate the blessing that God gave us. Because now we will not be over-functioning, now we will not be people-pleasing. So whatever is going to come, it's going to be coming from a place of blessing and a place of peace. So this book of Haggai really shows us, whatever we have had to go through, and it also shows the heart of God towards the matter. Another thing it also shows, you see, God was calling the people of Judah into rebuilding the temple. But you need to understand, they are not the ones who ruined the temple in the first place. So you need to realize that in life, some of us, our temples, we are not the ones who ruined it. It was ruined by other things. Like I mentioned, maybe abuse, maybe neglect, maybe divorce, miscarriages, all kinds of losses. However, as much as painful as it was, it is our responsibility now to ensure that our temples, to ensure that we rebuild our temples. So now as we begin the year, or as we continue the year, it's a time where many of us want new. We are expecting to start new habits, new opportunities, new, left, right, and center. But the thing is, it is written in the book of Matthew that we do not put new wine into old wineskins. You know, kitambo, wine used to be stored in wineskins, and those wineskins needed to be new because new wineskins were very elastic. They could handle the pressure, they could handle the expansion. But if you put new wine into an old wineskin, it doesn't expand. What it does, it bursts. Now our internal structures or our temples are like the wineskins. If you continue trying to put new wine into old wineskins, then that's when we burst. That's when we get stuck into anxiety. That's when we fall into depression. Why? Because we are trying to be stretched out beyond our capacity. So it is important to understand that in addition to the declarations that we made in 31st, which are very important, in addition to the 1,000 promises that we made to ourselves, in addition to all that, we need to realize for us to see lasting changes into our life, one, we really need to rebuild our temple. We really need to start from the point of healing. And we also need to understand that we need to ensure the internal structure that is going to carry it is healthy, and it's okay, and it is safe. So putting new wine into old wineskins looks like you looking for a new relationship, still stuck in the same attachment styles. Or for example, you looking into like new job opportunities, but you're still stuck in things like people pleasing and all that. So the question is, how is your wineskin? Where is the new being deposited? And that's why this is a call into ensuring we need to start first by rebuilding the temple so that we can ensure the new that is coming is able to sustain. So I don't know what the kind of losses that you have been through or the traumatic experiences that you have been through. It's not a matter of starting in the external, but it's a matter of starting in the internal and understanding where are you at in terms of your heart, in terms of your emotions, in terms of your thought process, and in terms of the safety within your body. So as we begin, let us begin first by rebuilding the temple.